I want to welcome you this evening to Science Study Break. For those of you who've been coming since the very beginning, this is Science Study Break number 22. So thank you all for making it so successful and enjoying it. This is a program, if you're new to it, where we evaluate presentations of science, technology, engineering, and medicine as they're shown in popular culture. We have been doing TV shows or movies to look at things like this, but in our last Science Study Break, we moved into the world of graphic novels, and we're hoping to do more of that. So here's the legalese that you need to know. You can see that many cameras are all around you, and that sound is being recorded, and so your images may be broadcast. So you've been notified. We want to thank you for coming out. We know that you could have been at the Death Cab for Cutie show, so we appreciate you being here this evening. And we also want to thank our generous supporters of the series, University Federal Credit Union, who make this programming possible. So give them a hand. So we have an archive online where you can see some of our past programming just to give you a feel for the flavor of Science Study Break and what sort of things we cover. And you can also look at some of our past programs on the UT Austin YouTube channel. This one will also be on the YouTube channel in a few weeks or so after this program. If you'd like to suggest a Science Study Break program, either a presenter that you would like to see, or a TV show or a movie, or now a graphic novel that you'd like to be given the Science Study Break treatment, you'll notice that on the arms of your chairs there's some feedback forms. So please use the forms to let us know if there's some programming that you recommend for the future. We've got pencils here if you're missing a pencil. You can follow us on Twitter at Sci Study Break, or you can follow UTLSL for the Life Science Library. You can also follow us on Facebook, and if you're tweeting this event, the hashtag is SSBApes. And now, I'd like to give you some quick tips on what the UT Libraries can do for you by introducing From the Tip Jar, which is a UT Libraries series focusing on quick library tips that come out every other Monday and that help you find ideas to squeeze the most out of your UT Library experience, do efficient research, save money by using some of the library features and things like that. So for example, you can retrieve AV material from a library to one closer to you, or you can save money by checking out equipment at the libraries. So this is on the News for Undergraduates blog. Every other Monday, be looking for the tip jar. And if you have a tip that you'd like us to have or to cover, then you can send something to lib-instruction email address here. Okay. So tonight's program looks at the biology and social life of apes, and it uses scenes from Project Nim and from Planet of the Apes movies. And we're fortunate to have Dr. Claud Bramblett with us. Dr. Bramblett holds a BA and MA in Anthropology from the University of Texas at Austin and a PhD in Anthropology from UC Berkeley. From March 1963 to May 1964, he was employed by the Southwest Foundation for Research and Education in San Antonio, Texas, as a manager of the Darajani Primate Research Station in Kenya, East Africa, accompanied by his biologist wife, Sharon. He's been with UT's Anthropology department since 1967, where he's taught courses on primate behavior, primate anatomy and taxonomy, and field methods in primatology and primate evolution. His research interests include the behavioral biology of bonins and baboons in captivity, behavior changes in social structure in Cercopithecus and Papio, heritability of behavior in bonins and baboons, and the socio-ecology of Cebus, Atiles, Saimiri, and Alwada. He's a member of the American Association of Physical Anthropologists, the American Anthropological Association, the American Society of Primatologists, the International Primatology Society, and the Animal Behavior Society. In 2003, he became an emeritus professor, and in addition to his continuing writing projects, Dr. Bramblett and Sharon now spend much time in the company of mesquite bean llamas. Please welcome Dr. Claud Bramblett.
Before I begin, I'd like to add something to the curriculum vitae, since some of you are going to be professors someday. When I was 11 years old, I played hooky from school, and I explored the old schoolhouse. And I discovered that there was an attic above the auditorium that they stored old books. And I would play hooky and climb up the stair. It was actually a ladder to the attic, and sit there in the semi-dark and just loved reading old books. And one of the books I read was an autobiography of a Crow Indian chief by the name of Pliniku. And it just turned me on. I thought, this is fantastic. So I sat down and wrote a letter, literally addressed it to the University of Texas, Austin, Texas. And I wasn't surprised, but now in retrospect, I'm very surprised. The university wrote me back. And they said, the subject you're interested in is called anthropology. And that and the correspondence that followed is really why I'm here today. So when you get to be faculty and that little kid writes you, answer him. It is important. You've all seen this before, so I thought I'd cheat. This is old vocabulary. It's not new, but it's simple, and it's the vocabulary I like to use. The movies Planet of the Apes really started as a series of 2 movies, and in the first one, 3 American astronauts get in a rocket and take off, and they travel through time back into the future and arrive on Earth to discover that human civilization has destroyed itself with atomic war. And humans have reverted to a primitive status. They've lost their technology. And in their place, the great apes have risen to a technological level of early humans and become the dominant technology of the planet. And of course, the human astronauts are treated very badly by the apes. The second movie, which really completed the series, in the second movie, the apes took the human spaceship, rocket, and 3 of their astronauts traveled back to Earth, going back in time to the present day. And of course, the ape astronauts are treated very badly by humans. One of the ape astronauts is female, and she gives birth to a son, and that son provides the genetic basis for the rise of the apes to the human niche in the distant future when nuclear war has destroyed human ecology.
Somewhere in the universe there has to be something better than man. Has to be.
The words are Charles Edison. Get out of my signal! Your words can make landed! The worldly minds of the galaxy will challenge every idea you've ever had of civilization. A planet where man is the lowest order of living thing, and the superior beings are apes. They build the cities, make the laws, the gods, and control the gods. Set up a race of slowly terrified humans who run wild in the jungles, are caged in the prisons, and stuffed in the museums. 20th Century Fox transforms the motion picture screen into Planet of the Apes. The air moves finest now, since bridge on the River Black.
The world gone insane. Upside-down civilization could not be real. Yes, full of madness and terror.
Man has no understanding. He can be taught a few simple tricks, nothing more.
You did it. Cut of his brain, you bloody baboon! It's a man! It's a man! It did not end here. It ended in an episode so unpredictable, so shocking, that it made the horrors preceded seem calm and gentle as a summer's night.
This is Dr. Zero, her loving husband Cornelius, and little Milo. the most dangerous to man is little Milo. Why? The time is 1973. The place is right here on Earth. How did they get here? What is their reception?
Welcome, gentlemen, to the event.
Escape from the planet of the apes. Their adventures are completely fresh, completely new, astonishingly different from what you experienced in Planet of the Apes and beneath the Planet of the Apes. At first, feared and imprisoned. We'll take the female first.
I love this the Wisconsin General Test Apparatus.
Well, she seems to be pretty smart. All right.
Well, why doesn't she take me? Because I loathe bananas.
Do we know who our friends are and who our enemies?
And how in the name of God are we to know that unless we communicate? We can speak, so I won't come.
The President convenes a special board of inquiry.
Have you a name?
Zero.
Those yellow don't talk. Tell me what she left me.
Embraced by our civilization, the nation gives them a hero's welcome.
Address, please. Well, it's sort of like grape juice plus.
Very wet.
It's certainly the most incredible story this reporter has ever covered.
And you share the impact of every incredible moment.
Must have been a shock.
Shot my foot. I'm pregnant.
The President's chief advisor wants them murdered, or else the human race cannot survive. They escape. The birth of an infant who could threaten their very existence.
You're the second human I kissed.
The reckless kiss. The stunning climax.
Zero. I want a baby. Everyone gives me a shoot.
Why was Washington thrown into a turmoil by this one baby?
Okay, obviously these were humans wearing Halloween masks, so I don't need to talk about locomotion or anything like that. The two things about the film that I would like to point out, they use the apes speaking human speech. The ape vocal tract and the ape motor cortex is very, very different from the human. And apes, particularly chimpanzees that are human raised, have learned to make human speech words, things like papa, cup, simple things, but the reality is they could learn to speak words, but the acoustics and everything will be so different, a movie audience wouldn't understand English spoken by an ape vocal tract and motor cortex. Now, there's another interesting thing I thought about that movie. It set up a caste system where the police are the gorillas, the administrators are orangs, and the scientists are the chimpanzees, and the humans are vermin. There are some substantial differences in between various apes, and generalizations don't work no more than they would work for making generalizations about humans, because there is variation. But chimpanzee, the white-faced common chimpanzee males are often have very explosive temperaments. So in a moment, they can flash and be aggressive and do great damage to you, and then a few moments later be calm and friends again. It makes the adult male chimpanzee a really dangerous animal to be around unless you're equipped to deal with an adult male chimpanzee. Orangs, in contrast, don't have the explosive temperament to really do you injury on a moment's notice. Orangs, if you offend them, if you're a zookeeper or whatever, the orang is not likely to immediately attack you, but he'll brood about it and think about it and plan and retaliate at some point in the future, maybe days later, when you've long since forgotten the encounter or the occasion. Then they may get their retaliation. So there are some interesting differences.
We're talking about huge potential for millions of people. Our therapy enables the brain to repair itself. We call it a cure.
I want you to stop testing mushrooms ASAP.
We test one subject. I want to make sure it's stable.
I designed the 112 for repair. This feature's gone way beyond that.
Only increased intelligence.
Skills that far exceed that of a human counterpart.
This is wrong, Will.
It works.
And what about Caesar? Where does he fit in?
That ship's company property.
He doesn't spend any time with other ships.
They're not people, you know.
You're trying to control things that are not meant to be controlled.
They are contaminated. Put those apes down.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
I'm sorry. This isn't my fault. This has to stop. This isn't the way. You know what they're capable of. Please come home. If you come home, I'll protect you.
boy, computer graphics have come a long way, and the bipedalism is overdone, but there were a couple of things that this movie suggests that I think are really worth noting. One was there was a line in there, they're not human. It raises an interesting question. One of the things that people did early on in studying chimpanzees is have them do sorting. You sort objects into shape, into color, into any kind of category that the researcher could imagine. And an animal like Vicky was very, very good at sorting. Now, these are chimpanzees that have worked long and spent many hours with humans, and so they're humanized. So if you give an animal like Vicky, which she did, and give her photographs and say sort into animals, into humans, and so she'll sort, put the human photographs into the human stack and the animal photographs into the animal stack. A picture of her own chimpanzee father, she'll put in the animal stack. When she comes to her picture, it goes in the human stack. And that's a very common reaction for the chimps that have that kind of social experience. So it raises an interesting question, is she human or is she chimpanzee? Species-wise, she's very much a chimpanzee, but if you ask her, she's human. And that raises a number of other intellectual issues of self and other things. Think about it. Now, could a chimp match a human in intelligence, even without the magic potion?
This chimp has learned to count just like humans, but how does its memory ability hold up? In this test, the numbers 1 to 9 were quickly replaced by blank squares, and the chimp had to remember their position on the screen. The 3 young chimps tested were all very good at the task, leading researchers to believe they had something similar to photographic memory. Young chimps outperformed both their mothers and human university students. When the numbers were flashed on the screen for shorter periods of time, humans had trouble remembering their order, whereas the chimps performed just as well. It's the first time chimps have beaten humans at a memory test.
Now, one interesting thing about people, and scientists are people too, you can be smart and dumb in the same sentence, in the same thought. And that's one of the things that makes science interesting too. There's a whole series of dogmas that when I was a university student were readily repeated in an amazing number of contexts. And the only humans kinds of paradigms. I very vividly remember being in class here at UT when a professor that I respected very much gave a nice lecture on the only human sequence. And one of the things he pointed out is that chimpanzees are incapable of accurate or aimed throwing because it's just anatomically impossible for them. And he went on through the long list. But he finished the lecture with a humorous story about a very famous chimpanzee at the Brooklyn Zoo who collected his feces and would bombard the tourists with deadly accuracy. And I'm sitting there in class and saying, wait a minute, there's something not quite right here. And I could go on, but you get the general idea. A lot of the early chimpanzee information comes from people who had zoos, who had private menageries. But one of the first really serious large laboratories, it took place during World War I. And I recommend Kohler too. Is an interesting thing. A lot of these old publications, you can get them on Google Scholar for free. But Kohler's publication is interesting because it's still in print, which tells you something about its content. Kohler looked at chimpanzee problem solving, how they do well with solving puzzles and so on. But he wasn't interested in measuring, are they smart? Are they smarter than humans? Or are they dumber than humans? He was working to try to answer the question, do they have insight? The kind of human thinking that takes place when you look at an array of information and integrate that to solve a problem. And he demonstrated very, very beautifully that chimpanzees do this quite readily. The guy in the picture, just for your curiosity, his name is Sultan, one of Kohler's 9 chimpanzees. In the United States, the first really serious chimpanzee laboratory was Robert Yerkes. And if you ever want to look up and read about a curious figure that's an amazing accumulation of good ideas and bad ideas, perhaps, take a look at Yerkes. He's fantastic. Now, Yerkes had gotten interested in apes by going around to menageries and people, a lady in Cuba who had a bunch of apes in her collection. And when he had opportunity to buy a pair of bushmeat chimpanzees, he emptied his bank account, literally, and bought them, and emptied the chicken coop in the backyard and drafted his children as caretakers. My family will see some familiarity in that. And set up to study these 2 chimps. He named them Chim and Pan. Chim is the one on his right hand. I'm sorry. Chim is the one on his left hand. Pan is the one on his right. Chim is a bonobo, a pygmy chimpanzee, but they didn't know that there was such a thing at that time. Now, these 2 chimps didn't live very long. Pan was in the terminal stages of tuberculosis and only lived a few months. The bonobo died a short time afterwards from pneumonia, but they ignited Yerkes' curiosity and interest, and with the help of Yale University, he set up the first major laboratory to systematically study chimpanzee mental abilities in the United States, in Florida at Orange Park, and it later became the Yerkes Regional Primate Center in Georgia. Now, in the period up through World War II, they established essentially the mental abilities of chimpanzees to an amazing degree. Cooperation, problem solving, even use of money, almost anything they could think of. And they did a lot of work with gorillas as well. But it had no impact. It had no impact because all the professors, most of the professors around the country, were still listing the only humans list and routine. So Yerkes' work and Kohler's work were known, but literally not integrated into the curriculum.
Now Tanzania.
When I looked at the wild and rugged mountains where the chimpanzees lived, I knew that my task was not going to be easy.
She had been sent by renowned anthropologist Dr. Louis Newton, who then approached the National Geographic Society about supporting Jane's work. She has no field experience or college degree. What she has is determination to observe chimpanzees with a mind uncluttered by conventional scientific methods.
When I first came to Gombe to study chimpanzees, I knew nothing about them. Nobody really knew very much about them.
She also has the courage to spend months in a remote, even dangerous place, getting closer to wild chimps than anyone before her.
This is not a good idea.
Within weeks, she is making astonishing discoveries. Chimps will hunt down large mammals and eat them. And more shocking, they not only use tools, but make them as well.
It chimpanzee is actually modifying a natural object to suit it to a specific purpose, thus making a tool.
When Louis Leakey first heard about tool using a Gombe, he got extremely excited and said, now we have to redefine man, redefine tool, or include chimpanzees with humans.
Now, I admire and respect Jane Goodall a great deal, and this film does not do justice to her. It was not easy. It didn't happen rapidly. You're talking about years of her life. Actually, the first years literally getting nowhere to accomplish this. But she did contribute a great deal of knowledge about wild chimpanzees. But the distribution of that film had another impact. You heard the narrator say, nothing was known about chimpanzees. There really wasn't anything about chimpanzee abilities, intelligence and mental abilities, the tool making, the diet, all of that was previously known, but ignored. And suddenly the professor in class couldn't stand there and go through his list of only humans, only humans, only humans, when all the students out there had seen this film and knew it wasn't so. And it had a tremendous impact in the curriculum and in the way that the scientific community began to think and work with animal behavior. Sometimes things are more complicated than you think. By the way, it is really a bad idea if you're doing field work with chimpanzees to become part of the troupe, because chimpanzees aren't nice to each other in a way that humans would like them to be.
Throttle forward. That's it. Up. Go up. That's right, pull it back. That's good, that's good.
That's a very impressive flying there, Garrett.
Hey, it's in Jaeger. Give me 5.
It was a top secret project, and only Virgil knew the truth.
What's he doing?
I don't know, man. I mean, I've never seen this before.
You don't believe it? Oh. Sorry. Oh.
There were real projects like Project X. The Air Force did do those things. And there was a project like that here at UT. And one of the things that the UT project contributed was the first American astronauts. Sam, rhesus monkey born in a UT facility here in Austin, actually was the first American astronaut to survive the trip into space and come back alive and be recovered successfully. And Sam, well, I'll put in a plug for UT. Then the first astronaut was born and an ex-student, yes, at UT. You've been watching before the presentation the sequence of language experiments, but let me point out a couple of things. The first really successful project to teach sign language to a chimpanzee was the Washoe experiment with the gardeners in the late 60s. Now they have a problem. This is at a time when everybody knows only humans have language, and they knew they had an uphill battle. They knew that a lot of the scientific community was going to say the chimp is imitating, the chimp is copying, whatever the chimp is doing, it's not using sign language. So when they decided to present their program to the scientific community, they booked an auditorium much larger than this. And they put all the scientists over on one side, all the anthropologists over on one side, and they went out into the neighborhood and recruited native speakers of American Sign Language, members of the deaf community, and put them on the other side of the auditorium. And they had 2 translators, one translating for the scientists and one translating for the deaf. And so the scientists the anthropologists sat there for the evening and watched this film, which was quite a long film, and they had to be translated to, but the audience that were out of the deaf community needed no translator. You know, they were laughing and reading and reacting to the chimp's signs very readily, and it made a very, very convincing presentation that Washoe actually was signing. It wasn't, you know, some kind of fake. So if you ever presented with that kind of dilemma, think of a solution, you know, similar, at least as ingenious. Sarah with David Premack did a number of things, you know, Sarah and other chimps, but to me the most impressive was they were using symbols like Chinese characters, except they're not, on a magnetic board and make sentences. And he was able to use them to communicate new word meanings. Like if she didn't know the color brown as a word, they could present her with a sentence, brown is the color of chocolate. And she could use the color brown correctly after that. Sarah came under a lot of criticism later as being a clever hands phenomenon. Lana is a chimp that uses a computer keyboard. It's actually a keyboard designed for her to make simple requests and simple statements. But that doesn't mean she's simple. Coco is a gorilla. The gorillas at the San Francisco Zoo are bushmeat gorillas, and very often a bushmeat gorilla that's been raised sort of outside of a gorilla context, when the female has her first infant, she doesn't take care of it, she rejects it. And subsequent infants, then they normally do take care of. So Coco's mother rejected her, and she had to be human reared. Penny Patterson got permission from the zoo to teach this infant gorilla American Sign Language. And it progressed very nicely. When Coco began to mature into a young adult female, she was a very valuable animal. And the zoo, of course, wanted to put her back into exhibit into the colony. She's a very valuable animal. At that time, her dead carcass was worth more than $10,000 on the market for dissection. So you can appreciate that there was a real conflict of values going on here. And some of us, at least I was hoping that it would go to court, and that at least flaky California judges would put Coco onto the stand to testify in her own behalf, and thus establish in California at least that gorillas were persons. But the zoo caved in and Penny won, and we'll talk more about Coco later. The Nim Chimpsky project, and we'll show a film on this, Terrence did this specifically to demonstrate that the Washoe project was wrong, and that Washoe really wasn't using sign language spontaneously. I don't know how to pronounce the name AI. The Japanese Primate Center began to do projects in chimpanzee intelligence, and you just saw a clip on chimpanzee intelligence from that project. Jantech was one of the earliest projects that did sign language with orangutans, and then Kanzi is a bonobo, the black-faced chimpanzee, that began to learn to communicate by sitting and watching him trying to teach his mom. His mom rejected the learning, but Kanzi did accept it and is now an extraordinarily capable bonobo with using a lexigram, essentially a keyboard or an object printed diagram lexigram page to communicate, and has a tremendous understanding, a tremendous vocabulary of spoken English to him.
I thought, wouldn't it be exciting to
sign language, and that's essentially why I started Project Nim.
I know nothing about chimpanzees. Herb wanted me to take him into my home as if he were a child. The fact that we could share language with an animal seemed very radical at that time.
There was no family discussion. It was just, oh, we're having a chimp. We're going to teach a sign language. Nobody in the house really was fluent in sign language.
Everything was about treating him like a human being. He liked alcohol. He loved driving fast in cars. I breastfed him for a couple of months. It seemed completely natural.
I couldn't believe it. It was the 70s.
Herb wanted a schedule and charted progress. I didn't supply that.
There was utter chaos. There were no journals. There were no logbooks. This was a scientific project.
I had an implicit faith that Nim would learn signs.
I just mapped out a teaching plan for Nim, and I did it. Nim was learning signs rapidly. They're going up, 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 up. I could see I was succeeding. There was all this excitement and hype about the project.
I had a relationship with a chimpanzee and I had conversations with it in species.
Nim gone from being this meek little huggable toy to a robust young chimpanzee.
He's going to be big, 5 to 6 times the strength of men.
He's got fangs.
This is 37 stitches.
In that sense, he was becoming more chimp-like. It didn't seem to be a course for long. I had never regarded him as a child. I regarded him as a scientific project. Nobody keeps a chimp for more than 5 years.
That's the best time of my life. I've never had such a good time. Except maybe I agree for that shit.
The reality of it is it's not a doll, it's not a toy, it's not a human, it's a chimp.
I didn't care about the language argument after a while. It didn't matter to me. He might not have had sentences or grammar, but there's no question that there was communication going on, and I saw it clearly. He talked about the trees, the berries that he found. He liked to play.
I'm not sure what happened there, but the Nim project is a very poorly designed and executed experiment, and Nim's progress, I think, reflected that. It's hard to teach sign language from a group of teachers who don't do sign language. Now, I want to show you a little bit of Coco and another gorilla companion, Coco and Michael. Remember this? Look in the back seat as it goes along.
On the campus of Stanford University, Penny Patterson, 28, a graduate student in psychology.
See the gorilla in the back seat too?
American Sign Language is the language used by the deaf in North America.
Now the clip you're going to see is a teaching clip, not a testing clip.
Words. For instance, pretty, happy, sad.
Share.
Share.
See, she's training here.
Share. Sleep better.
Sleep.
Sleep. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sour. Sour. Sponge. Taste.
Taste. Coco's current vocabulary is approximately 300 words. These are the words she produces. But she understands probably at least another 200 to 300 words. And she has, on occasion, produced 500 different words at least once, although not all of these have qualified by our strict criterion, which is spontaneous and appropriate use on half the days of a given month.
Time? Yes.
Tongue?
What's your tongue?
Toothbrush.
Apple.
Afraid.
All. With all this candy? Coco, you're going to decide next. Here. All. Coco, have all. Right.
I'm going to show a short clip of Michael, and he's asked to tell his memory of his mother. Now, Michael is a bushmeat, infant, so his last memory of his mother was when she was killed, and this is how he describes it. Not good grammar, but I think very powerful. Now, quickly, a couple of Bramblett comments. The classic test of whether a species has a person at home, whether you're self-aware, is a mirror test where you look at yourself in the mirror and recognize yourself. And from Bramblett's point of view, there is a concept called a home range, which we assume that lots of different species have. And to me, if you have a mental map of your home range, self has to be on it, or you don't know where you are. And so for me, it's not an issue. A lot of the contemporary animal behavior people argue that the difference between humans and non-human primates is that non-human primates have no theory of mind, that they know stuff, but they don't know that they know stuff. So they cannot attribute mental states to others. And to me, this doesn't make sense. The ability to attribute a state of mind, to attribute intention to others is a very powerful ability. He's watching me, he's following me. Is he hungry? Is it play? We do very readily do intention. And I have every confidence that at least a lot of other non-human species do intention as a regular part of their mental processes. Now, I want to close with a couple of quick things. One is the status of the apes at the moment. In 2000, NIH legislation was passed that NIH no longer does research with chimps, no breeding. They're essentially put into retirement. And since then, legislation was passed that makes it not reversible. They can't bring them back out. The place that's responsible for retiring all of these guys is a place called Chimp Haven in Georgia. There are a couple of other smaller sites. The Center for the Great Apes specializes in show business retired apes. The Washington University site is the leftovers from the Washoe Project and so on. But the great apes in research are going to be retired. Now, the current thing that's happening, in 1979, chimpanzees were listed as threatened. In 1990, they were listed as endangered if they were in the wild, but captive animals were not listed as endangered on the hope that they would be propagated to protect the species. In reality, captive chimps are not being propagated. NIH isn't doing any breeding at all, and comments will close this month on whether or not to make all chimpanzees endangered, and my expectation is they will all be listed as endangered. Now this presents some problems. Chimp habitat is not protected. Population growth in some of the African countries is still climbing dramatically. Countries like China are looking at areas that are chimp habitat for future food development, agribusiness. China is looking to Africa to feed it in the future. And you get the general idea. I could go on for a long time. But one point I want to make is the bushmeat trade. Bushmeat, where you hunt the great apes and eat them or sell their carcasses. When you hunt them, you wind up with infants that you find other uses for. And when they get a little larger, you could eat them. And I'd like to make the bushmeat trade a little personal. In July 1970, I got a call from the airport saying, come pick up your monkey. And I said, you got the wrong person. I'm not expecting any monkeys. And they read me the list, the address on the box. It was me. So I went out to the airport and was shocked and astonished. This is what was in the box. And we called him Huddles. He lasted about a month here before we found a home for him. The best place I could find at the time was the San Diego Zoo. Bushmeat is not a good idea. Okay. Thank you very much.
Questions for Dr. Bramblett?
Did you ever find out who sent you that one?
The question was...
I couldn't hear it, sorry.
Did you ever find out who sent you the one?
It was an undergraduate here at UT who was married to a zoology graduate student. He was doing his dissertation research on amphibians in Africa. She saw this bushmeat animal in a market and decided to rescue it. It cost her $5 to get the paperwork. She put it in a box and mailed it. Yes?
I saw on the slide that there were a lot of chimpanzee communication experiments going on in the 60s, 70s, late till the 1980s. Is there anything going on now?
Kanzi is still going on. The survivors of the Washoe project are still going. Yes, there are, but they're in sort of retirement circumstances, but are they still communicating? Yes. One of the things they did with the Washoe project is when she had exposure to other chimps, the humans stopped signing. And they did that deliberately to see if she would teach signs to the infants. And she did. She thought that the humans had gone nuts to suddenly stop talking, but yes. Coco is still going. Yes?
You said that the vocal, like motor processes and everything, make it so that verbal speech
They can do words, but you wouldn't recognize them.
Are there researchers out there who have kind of like learned to interpret those sounds and be able to communicate verbally?
There were some of the early ones, like Vicky, they tried this and they could understand a few of her words, but it didn't get far enough along that they would follow it very much. Someone like Lana, who's using a keyboard to talk with a computer, she makes sounds as she's doing it, but the humans don't know what she's doing. I mean, she knows, but they don't.
So it's
Yeah, the best guess would be, yes, you can elicit speech out of it, not human kinds of things, strings, but it would be so different that it's hard for someone who didn't know the animal to recognize what the word was.
I remember hearing a long time ago about an individual who was researching Washoe and said that the animal had actually synthesized compound words for things that he'd never seen before.
Yes.
For example, it saw a duck and it made the phrase water bird in American Sign Language. Is there any evidence of gorillas doing that?
The Cocoa Project, yes, this happens. Because there are a lot of circumstances that arise that they haven't been taught words to deal with.
So do they ask questions like, what is that, if they don't recognize?
Yes, and some of them will point. Many of them didn't. So it's hard to make a universal statement because a lot of it will depend on circumstance and experience. Does that make any sense? But the things like the Cocoa Project, the Washoe Project, where humans have worked with the animal for so many years, they're family members. Penny Patterson would never, give up Coco. It would be like losing a family member. And I'm sure Coco feels the same way toward Penny. Remember, the socialized animals, Coco thinks she's human. Now, she knows the difference between the species, a human and gorilla. But if you gave her a classification, she's going to put herself in the human category. Yes?
Is there, I know, like, I've heard of this one area where people learn sign language for themselves and they develop their own syntax. Like, do the chimps or gorillas, are they able to use correct syntax or grammar, or do they just...
One problem is that when these projects often started, the humans involved did not know American Sign Language. And so the humans weren't good at the correct grammar to begin with. And so the grammar that you would think of as inherent in American Sign Language may not be in some of these projects because the participants didn't have it to begin with. Yes?
So with time, like, all of the examples, like the big, I don't know, the influential research, whatever, that happened in the 70s and 60s and stuff, are there new things coming out today that are, like, just as big, like, or they're more human-like, or is it still kind of coasting on what was found out in the 70s?
I don't know how to answer that. The reality is, when you get down to really basic issues, we learned about those pretty early on, but getting them accepted in a broader scientific community has been slow. I don't expect, for example, something that Coco does to revolutionize what we don't know already, but I might be surprised. Yes?
You mentioned how a chimp at one point can be suddenly violent and then the next one can be friendly. What
Yes.
other mentality causes that?
I don't know, I assume it's personality. And now, not all chimps are like that. Apparently the bonobo is much less prone to explosive aggression. Gibbons can be like that because in gibbon play, aggressive contact is a common thing. If you're another gibbon, you deal with it. If you're human, you bleed. And so in some ways, gibbons are more dangerous than chimps because they're small, they look harmless, and you don't think they're going to be as dangerous. I used to volunteer to clean a gibbon cage when I was a graduate student, and she loved to play games with you. You had to watch her every moment, or she'd have your ear, and she could be across the space in a flash, and it hurt very much. And so it was something we all knew about and watched. A zoo caretaker in Europe died. His gibbon playing the same game cut the veins in his neck and bled to death there. So it's, yeah. Yeah, a small child playing with the gibbon that his cage I cleaned had the flexor tendons cut to her hand, just playing with the gibbon. The gibbon didn't mean any harm. That happens. Yes?
Do they study ethics in chimpanzees? And if so, do they have the same ethical, moral standard as humans?
I don't know how to answer the question because I don't know. I would be surprised because the culture will differ greatly from one human group to another into how things are structured. Chimpanzees aren't human, but it doesn't mean there's not a person there. When I say they're not human, I mean they're not a human species. Yes?
So you said that one of the projects that you listed was to disprove the Washoe project? The NIM project? How did they go about disproving?
Oh, Terence was firmly convinced that Washoe really wasn't signing, that the humans were signing to her and then Washoe was copying them. And he based that on the film that he saw. So he didn't think that the chimp was really communicating and thinking and doing the sign language the same way. He thought it was imitation. And that's been a real problem in the scientific community, because if somebody's a skeptic, it's really, really hard to move their skepticism. I mean, if you think it's anatomically impossible for a chimpanzee to throw, then them throwing their feces is not a conflict in your mind. Yes?
You said that most sign language studies are with great apes. Have they tried anything with gibbons?
Not that I know of.
Would they be capable of learning sign language like the greater apes?
I don't know. The one gibbon that I had experience with, I wouldn't try it. If I tried it, I'd wear a helmet. Thank you very much.